track hard. We take it, we be optimistic, and we gonna win games, bro. All right, 3, 1, 2, 3.
All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. My guest today is Ryan Fowler. Ryan, I'll have to update the video soon. A lot of Ron Rivera in the background, a couple of Chase Youngs in there. Things move quickly. How you been, my friend? It's been a little bit.
It has been a little bit. I've been great. And how have you been yourself, Doug? Appreciate you having me on.
I've been good. Always glad to have you on. Maybe nobody covers the draft for this team as well as you do. You are getting ready to ramp up. This is your time, right? What does the next couple of months look like for you, Ryan?
Yeah, man, we are kicking in the 5th year. Best time of the year, right? Usually in Washington, this is our Super Bowl, right? The off season, how you build this thing. But obviously a brand new, fresh start with Adam Peters in the building. I'm excited to see what he does with this roster. But in a few weeks, we'll be down at the Senior Bowl. We got the Shrine Bowl kicking off. And then we work into pro days, visits, workouts, and then, of course, the penultimate in Detroit in late April.
Are you still you're in Virginia?
I actually live right outside of Philadelphia. So I'm in enemy territory up here.
Right. And how many of these off-season things, obviously we got the big one and then the combine, I'm assuming that you get to those. Do you also get to pro days? How busy are you this time of year?
Yeah, pretty busy. Lots of traveling really from late January to up until late April. We'll be at the Senior Bowl. Won't be down in Dallas, but obviously we'll have a lot of communication with those down there in Dallas for the Shrine Bowl. We'll have the HBCU Legacy Bowl. We'll also cover. We've had CGS last week in Fort Worth. We've got the Hula Bowl that just happened, Tropical Bowl coming up. And then, of course, when you get to pro days, so I'm locally here in the Philadelphia area. I'll most likely get down to Maryland, probably scoot over to Penn State, probably Pittsburgh this year, maybe make my way up to Boston College to see a guy like Christian Mahogany, interior offensive lineman. I'll be out at Shrine. So pretty busy time, but the most exciting time of the year, as I said.
There's no doubt about the Adam Peters interview, where obviously this is draft on tap. We're getting excited for the draft, but there's no need to go any further than before we get to Adam Peters. What did you think? A couple of interesting things. I thought Adam says he felt there were a couple cornerstone pieces on the team. I'll get your thoughts on that. And I thought that it was interesting that Josh Harris used when asked about what he liked about Peters, he said Peters does a good job of finding the edges. For a fan base that I think will be quickly learning about analytics with this group, that is like a hot word for analytics folk, right? Finding the edges, the little minutia in the edges that lead to the hidden yards, if you will. What did you take away from the press conference?
Yeah, I agree. I like that statement as well from him. And that really, for me, it separates Adam Peters as an evaluation, just a talent evaluation perspective, and with the rest of the GMs that Washington was interested in, and really the rest of the league for how he's built that San Francisco 49ers roster alongside John Lynch out there hip to hip. But I appreciate his openness yesterday to talk about where he wants to focus in building this thing. And that is through the draft, because whether it was Vinny Serrato or Scott McCloughan or Martin Mayhew, that opinion swayed a lot from different guys that were in the building. And you don't win Super Bowls flat out if you do not build through the draft. And when I look at Adam Peters, it's not just trying to win on day one and getting guys in the building that can not only wear a uniform for you, but also contribute. It's what you do on day 2 and day 3. Because, Doug, think about the general public when watching the draft, right? Day 1, you got people coming over, you're getting wings, pizza, drinks. People want to see the first 32 picks. But as you move into day 2 and day 3, the casual fans, they drift off, right? You're doing regular family activities. You're mowing the lawn. You're washing the car. That's when Adam Peters says, look, these are the guys that I want to target in rounds 3, rounds 5, round 6. They're not just going to come in and steal a check from me, but also contribute in multiple facets of a football game. And that's what separates him from the rest of the GMs, in my opinion, in the entire league.
One thing that San Francisco has that this team doesn't have, I think, is linebacker play and tight ends on this roster right now. Where do you see the biggest disadvantage at the DN position, the linebacker position, or the tight ends?
Yeah, I do think though, Doug, it is a shame. We're in the same spot from a roster construction perspective that we were this time last year. The same holes, and they have not been filled, unfortunately. Now, I'm staying positive about a guy like Emmanuel Forbes. You know, they drafted him as a cover 3 corner at Mississippi State and made him play man. We're not going to talk about that right now. I still have confidence in the kid moving forward. But for me, with the linebackers, tight ends, and edge, you got to get some backers in the building that want to fly downhill and knock somebody's chin strap off. And Jamin Davis being the only linebacker on this roster right now that's under contract is a massive, massive red flag, because I flat out have not seen the progression from Jamin Davis moving into now almost year 4 to where, look, number 52 can't even fit the run at this point in his career. And it's extremely disappointing that I have not seen that in his progression. And there are linebackers in this class. Now, Danny Stutzman going back to Oklahoma and Barrett Carter going back to Clemson threw a little bit of a wrench in this. But there are guys at the top, Doug, that I absolutely love, and we'll maybe get to them a little bit later. But for me, you want to have a core and your defense like a Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, or like a Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith in Baltimore. It starts at linebacker, and I absolutely think they'll make an addition or 2 in the offseason.
Yeah, on last night's film session, we broke down Mike McDonald's tape, and it's noticeable.
Yeah,
where we're lacking. I mean, they paid a lot of money to get Roquan Smith, and they ponied up a lot of assets. Well worth it. And you're right. We see what they're doing out there in San Francisco. I think one thing interesting thing is, with Baltimore, you have a pair of first rounders there at linebacker. At San Francisco, not so much though. I mean, again, that's these guys' ability to find guys later in the rounds, right? George Kittle, not a first or second rounder. That's where we find some hope in this thing, right? Is that maybe we got some guys in here that can evaluate some talent outside of the first round.
Yeah, I don't care. From my perspective, look, I try to evaluate corner, right corner to corner, Washington to Florida, Maine to Arizona. And if it doesn't matter if you're wearing an Alabama helmet, a Georgia helmet, or a USC helmet, I don't care if you're wearing a Fresno State helmet, a Vanderbilt helmet, or a South Carolina State helmet. If you can play and you fit what Washington wants to do on offense, defense, and special teams, then I feel like you should get an opportunity in the burgundy and gold. And I feel like that's how Adam Peters wants to approach this thing now, to where you're off the tracks as far as trying to get towards relevancy. Let's get the thing back on the tracks, work this roster up, lay the foundation, get guys in the building that want to compete, not just show up and get a check and have it on their locker stool every single Monday morning. Get guys that actually want to be here and play football at a high level, because, look, Doug, I don't know if we'll ever get back to the 80s and 90s, right? What we saw with Joe Gibbs. I wasn't even alive for that. I wish I was. I've never seen that consistent success, or even trying to build the roster and having a willingness to develop, right? Adam Peters, he's a breath of fresh air. Josh Harris was a breath of fresh air. Adam Peters now is that extra breath to get this thing going back on the tracks and towards competing in the NFC East, and hopefully in the near future, adding that 4th Lombardi trophy next to the other 3 in Ashburn.
Interesting. They didn't show the Lombardis this go around. They normally do at those press conferences. I also like that Adam Peters was calling. They were on a first name basis, very familiar, which I liked. It'll be interesting to see. This notion of building through the draft, I think, is easy to say. A lot of people want to do it. It's the way most good organizations are run. When he says that, does it make you feel like they'll be willing to trade out of number 2, or is 2 so high that you just can't afford to pass on the most important position in sports at 2? What do you think? I know it's early in the process. What do you think they'll do?
I'm a full supporter of trusting your board. And there's 32 different boards. They're all unique in the NFL, right? Different teams have different needs. And for Washington, they'll establish what they want to do. I've already talked to a few scouts these last few days as far as what they're going to focus on in the meantime, before head coach and offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Those positions are locked in, and we know who's going to be here running this thing, Doug, when we move into week 1 in September. But if Caleb Williams is there at 2, or a Drake May, or it's Jaden Daniels, get your guy. Get your guy in the building and let him build. Because I think if you're in the spot at 2, to where 12 years ago, we were sitting there at number 2 after trading a king's ransom to St. Louis, to Jeff Fisher, to where if Indianapolis took RG3, Washington was going to take Luck. They took Luck. we had RG3, and we enjoyed 2012. And they find themselves in a very similar situation now. If Chicago will, in fact, take a quarterback at 1, which I believe, Doug, that they shouldn't. They should take Marvin Harrison Jr., my top player in this class, to pair with DJ Moore and keep Justin Fields there with Matt Eberflus back, and they won 7 games this year. But at 2, it's your guy. If it's Caleb Williams, I'm bringing him home. Grew up in Bowie, went to Gonzaga. I'm taking Caleb Williams at 2, and that's my plan right now.
We hear so much about the Bears and what they'll do at 1, and I think it's a really interesting test that we've got going on here, where it's like the contracts for quarterbacks have gotten so big, it what just the basic quarterback after 4 years expects to make, that it makes these opportunities at 1 almost impossible to not hit the reset button on unless you're already rocking and rolling. Now, I think I'm with you. I think they were rocking and rolling towards the end of the year, even without anybody, I think, doing a good job of coaching up the offense. I think that was just them out there out-talenting people and lasting through, and the defense stepped up and played well down the stretch. But it's this notion that you got to pay Justin Fields $35 million a year.
Yeah.
And so then hitting the reason, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but then being able to hit the reset button and get 4 or 5 more years of a quarterback. So there's 2 questions. What is the difference in the talent level between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams? And then how do you disperse that, I guess, through how much money they'll be making?
Yeah, for me, look, it really comes down to no matter who you got under center at the NFL level, everything correlates. And I don't care if it's Caleb Williams and what he can do outside of structure. I don't care if it's the 6'4" Drake May and his ability to dissect within the pocket, or Michael Penix's ability to be the best vertical passer in this class, which he is, in my opinion, by far. It's the talent between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams, I don't think is far off. But when you have the career arc that Justin Fields has enjoyed, unfortunately, the first few years of his career, where he's bouncing from offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator and head coach to head coach and GM to GM, where there is no job security, and you're consistently behind the 8 ball, because every time you take a step forward, you're taking 2 steps back with someone gleaming down your ear hole saying, what are you going to do next? What have you done for me lately? Well, if you watch Justin Fields, right, I'm sure you saw him, Doug, the latter portions of this year, and there have obviously been flashes of Justin in Chicago to where he could be the guy. And I think it's just give him some job security. Let the kid learn at the NFL level, where everybody's fast, everybody's strong, everybody's physical. Defensively, you understand what you're looking at offensively. Now, more teams, more so than others, more talented than others. We all understand that. But hitting the reset button again and hoping that Caleb Williams within 2 or 3 years is going to bring Chicago to the playoffs, when the talent discrepancy between the two, from my opinion, is not a lot. And I thought Justin Fields, in my opinion, again, was extremely underrated coming out in that Trevor Lawrence class, to where I thought he should have been a top 5 pick over guys like Zach Wilson and Trey Lance. So again, talent discrepancy is not huge for me. And I just don't like bringing a guy in the building and saying, that's our guy, throw him in the fire and see whatever happens. Because every single time I think about a quarterback playing hero ball at the NFL level and not having anything around him, I think about the Super Bowl with Kansas City and Tampa Bay, when Kansas City had no line and Patrick Mahomes is running for his life. As good as Patrick Mahomes is, and as good as we understand how good number 15 is, you have nothing in front of you, and you have anybody else on the outside that can separate. You're going to have struggles as an offense. And that's what I've seen really from Justin Fields early in his career, to where they're trying to build this thing around him. They drafted Darnell Wright this year. They could very easily take Marvin and then take a tackle inside the top 10. I recently mocked Harrison and then Amarius Mims to them to build that thing up around him. Give some trust to the young kid, not having to go somewhere else and learn with another coordinator again and again, take that step forward and now 4 or 5 steps back. Trust in the kid, build it up. And in Washington's perspective, you're starting from the foundation. Take a guy and build around him as well.
If they go Fields, what is the trade compensation for Washington to then get up to 1? Or do you say, hey, the difference between, let's say, Caleb and May not big enough to give up future assets? What do you think it takes to get up to 1, and would you move up to 1?
Again, if Caleb is their guy and they think Chicago will go Caleb, I don't think, obviously Chicago will leave there, and I think Drake May is a hell of a consolation prize, honestly, if that's their guy at 2. But if they do go up to one, they want to go there, I think it absolutely may take a second-round pick, maybe a third next year. I don't think it'll be a crazy return. I know it's depending on how Chicago really evaluates Caleb Williams. If they think that, look, we're going to pass on him and let Washington take him, if that makes sense.
It does. And let's say, for the sake of argument, because it feels like more and more every day, I see more and more people feeling good in the idea that they'll trade Fields. What's the what do you think the likely return on Fields is in that situation? A third rounder?
I would say probably a late day 2, right, and a third rounder. Honestly, I think if he goes to a spot like Atlanta, I love that spot for him. See what they do at head coach and the pieces around him, and who does he have a shoulder to lean on in his headset. But I think probably multiple potential, maybe second rounders and definitely a third rounder. Because again, I'm a supporter of Justin Fields. I think he's an extremely talented kid. It's just we forget sometimes how much the success at the quarterback position correlates with those around him. And a guy like DJ Moore, right? You saw the potential that he has with a wide receiver 1. Why not continue to build around that guy in Chicago when you're trying to figure it out? Really, in the NFC North, that we don't know what's going on with Minnesota, right? Green Bay, they found their guy most likely in Jordan Love and their young pieces. So, and we know about the Detroit Lions with Dan Campbell, right? They're having some success up there.
They did pretty good.
Yeah, build around Justin Fields a little bit for me.
And that guy Jared Goff's not bad.
He's not bad at all.
It's amazing to me how quickly people wanted to write Jared Goff off like he wasn't a good quarterback.
No.
If Fields is available, would you trade down with the second pick to collect more and then be looking to make a trade for Justin Fields?
I personally wouldn't. I wouldn't. I want to start fresh in DC. I really do. And I think you're doing the same thing. You're just being repetitive, right, with the whole offensive coordinator switching spots again with Justin. I just would – I know he's in the NFC and not trying to root for other NFC teams, but, just want him to have success there as a player and as a man, as an individual, because these guys are not robots. Even though a lot of people out there think these guys are robots, don't have emotions, don't have feelings, they're actual humans, and they want to have some sense of job security. So I would stay at 2. I have talked about it recently as far as potentially moving back to 4 or 5 or 6 if you want to get more picks and they want to go with Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu if potentially
you have a preference between those two.
I do. I like Joe Alt. Fashanu for me, he has an immensely high ceiling, one of the highest ceilings of anybody in this class. But when I have 2 similar prospects as far as how am I going to separate these guys, I try to find similar tape. And I turned on the Ohio State gate tape for both Fashanu and Alt. And for me, Doug, Fashanu was on his face a little bit too much in that first half against JT Tuimoloau. And Joe Alt is a technician at the position. Now, athletically, there are many more guys in this class that have a higher ceiling than Joe Alt as an athlete in space. Uh-huh. But you want a technical and technically refined, well-coached Golden Domer out of Notre Dame that we know in history. You come out of Notre Dame and you're a lineman, you're most likely going to succeed as a high floor type of athlete. That is Joe Alt, to where you plug him right away, and I expect him to make in a potential 10, 11-year career, 5, 6 Pro Bowls and 2 or 3 All-Pros. So I'm on the Joe Alt train as he's my OT1 in this class.
He's a freaky dude. I have been saying more and more recently, I wouldn't be opposed to what they did in the Haskins draft if they took quarterback at number 2. I wouldn't mind trading back up into the bottom of the first round for a guy like you mentioned earlier, Mims from Georgia. Where do you have Mims in the class, and is he worth trading up into the bottom, middle of first round for? Because he both can play both right and left tackle, right? Talk about another freaky dude.
Yeah, he's a special athlete. His health this year threw a little bit of a wrench in his evaluation for teams, but at 100% health, Amarius Mims is a special type of athlete. I mean, the way he moves at his size, he looks like a running back or really a tight end. Just a special type of athlete. And I think he's someone for me that's probably going to be a top 15 player in this class. Yeah. I think someone could potentially take him there. So I don't think if you try to trade into the mid-20s, high 20s, I don't think he'll flat out be there. Now, this class is extremely deep with tackles. I think you get into late round 1 and portions of day 2 and into day 3. You're going to have a shot to take a guy, whether it's a Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, Dom Pooney from Kansas, even a sleeper name like Ethan Driscoll from Marshall that's going to be down at the Senior Bowl as far as that day 3 type of athlete. There are a lot of tackles in this class to where, look, I don't want a Joe Alt or a Fashanu or a Mims. I can wait a little bit to potentially to where Washington is in that early day 2 bucket and grab a tackle there if they like.
And okay, so let's assume before we get there, how big is I've had people ask me this. We talk all the time about ceilings and floors and who's got the biggest floor and who's got the lowest floor. And when we're talking about the top 3 quarterbacks, I'm assuming you have Daniels third.
Yes, I do.
What is the difference between May and Daniels?
Yeah, when I look at Jaden Daniels, I see a lot of – now, it was nice having Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and handing it off to Logan Diggs this year behind offensive line that at times was decent, but most of the time below average. I see a lot of RG3 in Jaden Daniels' game, specifically, Doug, in his linear ability as an athlete. Because people want to compare him right now. You'll see out there, he's Lamar Jackson because he's
Lamar Jackson.
He's not Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was an east to west, laterally extreme quickness type of short area quickness athlete. That is not Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels needs to learn to take care of his body, or he's unfortunately going to end up like Anthony Richardson this year, to where he's going to miss a lot of time. And what we unfortunately saw happen to Robert Griffin III in his career. So Drake May separates for me from Jaden Daniels and his ability to win inside the structure as that perfect mold, 6'4", extremely nuanced passer to where you can throw at the 1 o'clock arm angle, drop it down to 3 or 4, like we've seen from Penix or Caleb Williams as well. But just his ability to dissect inside a structure, then secondary work outside and run like we've seen from a Josh Allen, where he's not Jaden Daniels outside of structure. He is not Caleb Williams outside of structure. But I want a guy that understands can approach a line of scrimmage with not a ton of talent on the outside to read his progressions left to right, right to left, stick that back foot in the ground, and rip passes. Now, I will say, Doug, I want to see more consistency in between the numbers for Drake May, to where he has a little bit of turnover-worthy plays, late throws over the middle, even throwing it above receiver's head and opening up that rib cage. Guys don't want to go across the middle and get hit on their ribs. Those are things, advanced things, ball placement that those high-level quarterbacks do at the NFL level. Those are just a little things from Drake May in his game that I want to see from him. But just as a pure passer and dissector and progressor under quarterback, that's where he separates me from Jaden Daniels.
How many quarterbacks do you think go in the first round this year?
Williams, May, Daniels. I think J.J. McCarthy will go on day 1. I personally like Bo Nix.
You a bit of Cousins. Is that J.J. McCarthy?
I actually think he's in more athletic Jimmy Garoppolo is what I see in J.J. McCarthy. I know the Kirk Cousins comp, but he's a souped-up athlete compared to Kirk Cousins coming out of Michigan State. And then Michael Penix, Doug, his evaluation it remains fluid. Is the best word that I'll use, Michael Penix. People went crazy after the Texas game, and we saw that all year long from Michael Penix. And it's really nice to sit and throw to Romo Dunze and Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk and have Dylan Johnson behind you and have guys like Troy Fatanu and Roger Rosengarten protected for you. But when it gets to the NFL and things break down, I saw a lot of lazy mechanics. He's an all-arm thrower. We talk about pitching. I'm a baseball guy. I played Division I baseball. You engage your core, engage your legs when you throw. And the best quarterbacks in the NFL, now arm talent is undoubtedly there for Michael Penix. But you don't want to see the lazy mechanics. You don't want to see opening up those hips and just throwing out as sidearm over the middle of the field or late across the middle of the field. His mechanics are lazy for me at times. And when things break down, chaos ensues. And I see a lot of his evaluation, what I saw from him at Indiana. And really, Doug, when I put Michael Penix parallel to Hendon Hooker from last year. Now, I know that name has probably gone distant for some people because he was the backup in Detroit for most of the year, hurt. But when Hendon was at Tennessee, transferred in from Virginia Tech, for those Hokies alums out there, they know Hendon Hooker when he was in Blacksburg. And then he went to Tennessee with guys like Cedric Tillman on the outside and Jalen Hyatt. And everything was spread out. It was a lot of vertical one reads to where, look, I know that safety shallow. I'm going to read him. I'm going to throw it up to Jalen Hyatt. Or here's Cedric Tillman. I'm going to throw it to him as well. Or I can take off myself. And I saw that a lot from Michael Penix, to where it's just very easy to come to the line of scrimmage and make one read and get the ball out. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from him as a vertical passer, but as a day 1, round 1 guy to come in the building, if it's not in a Minnesota where I got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, I have a very tough time for me making Michael Penix my franchise type of guy at this point in time in his evaluation.
And that is based on talent. How much are scouts and decision makers going to be scared off by the injuries?
That too. The medicals are going to be huge for him. And I'm extremely pumped up that Michael committed to the Senior Bowl. I talked with Jim Nagy on my Twitter last night in Twitter Spaces with him, and he talked about Michael Penix going down to Mobile to where I think it's going to be a position to where his stock rises. He solidifies himself as a most likely top 15, top 20 pick, or he could slip in to the second round, similar to what we saw from Will Levis last year when he didn't show up to the Senior Bowl and ultimately went to Tennessee. So Senior Bowl is going to be big for him. And the reason why I say that is because he's going to be working with receivers that he's never worked with before. And the quarterbacks in Mobile last year, from a draft industry perspective, we were a little bit underwhelmed with the success that we saw from the guys there. And Tyson Bagent from Shepherd that went to Chicago to back up Justin Fields was the best quarterback in attendance in Mobile last year. Not hating on the other guys. It's just what we saw and really the environment that these quarterbacks are put in to where, look, he's going to have Spencer Rattler there, and he's going to have Michael Pratt and Bo Nix and Sam Hartman from Notre Dame. Those guys can play some ball too in a neutral environment with neutral.
They were rocking and rolling at the Senior Bowl, and I don't know why you wouldn't go. Why would you not go to Senior Bowl? Because they don't even make you play anymore. You can just go down there and meet with folk and do the medicals and the testing and talk with people. Any agent that doesn't tell their client that you have to be down in Mobile, that just doesn't make sense to me. You brought up a couple of names I'd like to run by you there. Bo Nix scares me. You know, I'm a Georgia guy. I watch a ton of SEC football. I don't have any idea whether you're getting Auburn Bo Nix or Oregon Bo Nix because I don't want anything to do with Auburn Bo Nix.
Yeah, I have an appreciation for Bo Nix's game and the fact that he's mature and he can operate efficiently. And there's a lot of time in this industry to where we hear that we want the trucks and not the trailers, right? And we talk about Brock Purdy in San Francisco. Yeah, he's a trailer in the Shanahan offense. Well, at the end of the day, you still got to put a helmet on and you got to execute with whoever is on the outside, Doug.
Yep.
And when I look at Bo Nix at Oregon, to where he had some weapons on the outside, and Troy Franklin and obviously Bucky Irving in the backfield as well, it was a nice pairing of weapons. But he can operate efficiently. And sometimes that's all it takes at the NFL level if you get in the right situation to lead an NFL offense. Because everybody wants your Mahomes, your Josh Allens, your Lamar Jacksons of the world. But we see across the league every year, we see guys like Tyler Huntley start, Josh Dobbs, Trace McSorley, our old friend Taylor Heineke. Those are the types of guys to where I'm not saying you want those types of athletes to bring you to a Super Bowl, but a couple, 2, 3, 4 spot starts potentially, or build on that type of guy and build around him. I think Bo Nix is more talented by far than all of those guys. So late first round for me for Bo Nix, middle of the first round. Denver's a sneaky spot to look at. Atlanta's a sneaky spot. If they do not trade for a guy like Justin Fields, we'll see what happens here. But I just appreciate the mature ability that Bo Nix has to operate an offense, how he's matured in college, realized, look, I declare out of Auburn, right? And it's not going to work out for me. But I go to Oregon, progress and evolve as a quarterback, as a not just a thrower or a passer, but again, as a quarterback, a processor under center, which matters. Then he could be a guy for me to come in offense and be an efficient leader under center and take care of the football.
You mentioned the running back from Oregon. Did he declare or did he go back?
I believe Bucky Irving did declare. I believe he did.
And
yes.
I like him in the middle rounds, right? I mean, Washington is going to need that kind of change of pace guy, right? And he's got juice.
Yeah, Bucky Irving from Oregon. There are a lot of repetitive skill sets, Doug, in this draft class in the running back position. You think of Braylon Allen, big boy out of Wisconsin, Ray Davis, Audric Estime, a lot of thick dudes, 220 plus pounds. Even Blake Corum's got no thickness to him out of Michigan. Mm-hmm. But Bucky Irving, Blake Watson from Memphis, who was just at Hula, and now he's going to be out at Shrine. And another name that I want Washington fans to keep an eye on is Amani Bailey from TCU. He's going to be down at the Senior Bowl this year. He split time at TCU this year with Trey Sanders. And when you turn on this kid's game, transfer from Louisiana Lafayette, who Washington has picked out of that bucket a little bit, right, with Percy Butler and Andre Jones. So transfer there to TCU. He is electric. And he has some fresh tread on the tires. Caught all 25 of his targets this year in space. So that third down type of J.D. McKissick weapon. He's electric. 5'9", 5'10", 205, 207 pounds. Love his game. Colorado tape, first game of the year, they lost to Deion Sanders' group. Just sensational in space. And I'm really excited to see him at the Senior Bowl. And from Washington's perspective, as you mentioned, middle rounds, fourth round. I have a fourth round grade right him on right now. He's a guy I would, whether he goes to Washington or somebody else, he's an absolute guy that I'm excited to see in his rookie season in the NFL because Amani Bailey can absolutely play.
I know I'm kind of just bouncing around here as my brain gets scattered, but we mentioned Spencer Rattler the other day, who I think stock may be climbing more after this season than most. I watched him take a pounding against Georgia and continue to get up and throw the ball until he just couldn't do it anymore. I like Rattler. I don't know what to make him at the NFL level.
Yeah, and that's what scouts are asking themselves too. What is Spencer Rattler? What is the projected 2023, right? We're heading into the 2022 campaign, the number 1 overall pick. And what happened going from Oklahoma to South Carolina and linking up with Beamer again? And I've talked with Spencer a couple times during the draft process, and he is the most, from at least my impressions, the most humble, hardworking kid that you could really have. And you could tell he's matured. I know a lot of people out there may have their impressions as far as that Netflix documentary ever they did when they said, oh, I don't like Spencer. He's cocky. He's arrogant. Well, for me, I like a guy with athletic confidence. I like a guy that's going to look at somebody on a one-on-one matchup and say, I have the arm to get it to Terry McLaurin 40 yards down the field, and I trust him to run past that guy. And Spencer Rattler has some of that in his game. And as a quarterback for him, that I feel like is going to continue to rise, as you mentioned in this process, and go down to Mobile and showcase well because he's extremely experienced as a diagnoser under center and has the arm talent to layer it to multiple levels. I'm excited for Spencer. And I think he's someone that we head into this year, this time next year or 2-3 years from now, to where he could go somewhere and find a home and say, man, this is the Spencer Rattler that we talked about coming out of high school in Pinnacle, out of that program in Arizona, then in Oklahoma, and what we saw from him, and reason why he was so highly touted for the last few years of his career.
We know about the Brock Bowers. We know about the Sanders from Texas. Give us some other tight end names that we should be looking at, because you would have to assume that they'll at least be looking at drafting a tight end this year.
They have to, Doug. They have to. For anybody out there that listens to my podcast, Commanding the Huddle, I bash the tight ends every single time I can. It's the tight end position in this league it evolves every single year. You have to get matchup nightmares at the position. And Washington, look, we remember when Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis were both on the same team. We remember Chris Cooley. Chris Cooley was not the best athlete in the world, but he understood how to separate over the middle of the field, and he was a tough runner. But when you look at this class, and you mentioned Brock from Georgia and Jatavian from Texas, who we'll see out at the Shrine Bowl, as you move forward into day 2 with Jaheim Bell from Florida State, who will be at the Senior Bowl, or Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, extremely versatile weapons. Jaheim Bell is one of my favorites in this class, late day 2, early day 3 for Washington, and getting somebody in the building is an immediate tight end 1 that you can line in line or in space. But as you move back into day 3 to where you want to get somebody to come in and compete and produce, because the Cole Turner progression, I never saw it in Nevada. I never saw it at the Senior Bowl, and I sure as heck haven't seen it in the first few years in Washington. John Bates
wouldn't play him this year, Ryan. They wouldn't play him.
Yeah, absolutely right. And John Bates as a wide tight end, okay, he's a throwback type of blocker. That's fine. Logan Thomas, thank you for your service. But as we move forward, right, Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona, I think is a heck of a player. Theo Johnson at Penn State may be the 3rd tight end taken in this class. But 2 guys that really excite me, well, 3 guys really. Bryson Nesbitt from North Carolina, 6'5", doesn't have a ton of experience in line. But similar to what we talked about with Sam Howell and the De'Ami Brown connection that never came to fruition, if you get Drake May in the building and you want to get a guy that familiar face on the perimeter that has elite separation ability at his size and that can stretch the seam, Bryson Nesbitt is a target of mine. And then as you move forward, 2 guys that have gotten a ton of attention, no one else in media, but in the draft industry, Colson Yankoff from UCLA, hell of a name, I know, Colson Yankoff from UCLA, is represented by Tom Brady's agency, and they're not just taking any slouches. And he's also out in California working with Les Spellman, who's one of the best pre-combine trainers in the class. And also another name is Mason Pline, Pline from Furman, who produced Ryan Miller last year. He's much better as a prospect, in my opinion, than Ryan Miller. He went to Hula Bowl this week, met with over 25 teams, and now has an invite to Shrine. And he has got a ton of attention from teams as that 5th, 6th, 7th round potential UDFA bucket. We'll see how he progresses. But just 2 names late in the rounds, Colson Yankoff, extremely athletic kid, as Mason Pline is, former basketball background that you can see over the middle of the field. Now, when I say that, I don't want you to think Cole Turner, because the guy turned like a catamaran. He couldn't separate from me or you. But Mason Pline, his ability over the middle of the field, be a nuanced route runner, extend away from his frame, whether it's in front of his face or out here to his right, or out here to his left. like his game as a potential late day 3 target if Washington wants to wait that long to add to the tight end room.
Couple more things for you before we get out of here. I talked with Jim Nagy last year after the draft and asked him about Ricky Stromberg and why he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. And I assumed that he had been nicked or something like that. And Nagy says, well, we didn't have a draftable grade on him and didn't invite him to the Senior Bowl. They drafted him high, didn't play him. This is an incredible year for centers. What do we do with the young man? And I mean, because can you move off of a guy that you haven't really even tried?
I don't think you can. I think you drafted him there. And I know, look, no ties for this new regime to Ricky Stromberg or Braden Daniels, so we didn't even see wear a uniform. We don't even know how he looks in a Commander's uniform and in the regular season. Yeah. So for me, I think you give a chance to Ricky Stromberg and Braden Daniels in year 2 now, really the red shirt freshman years, if you want to call it that, to get a chance to play. Because this Eric Bieniemy really wanted that Nick Gates. He brought in Andrew Wiley from Kansas City. Hell, he brought in Byron Pringle and Marcus Kemp too from Kansas City, and none of those additions work. So I'm all for competition at the position and proving that you deserve to play for me. So I would give a chance to Ricky Stromberg, absolutely, and Braden Daniels. His guard tackle versatility really shined for me in last year's class, so I would like to see him fully healthy and get a shot. But as you mentioned, this center class has some pop to it. And if Washington potentially were to go that route and start fresh there, usually you don't want to have potentially a new quarterback and a brand new rookie center as well. Sometimes you want to have that Jeff Saturday, Jason Kelsey type of center, that leader. But when you're building from the ground up, trying to lay that foundation, the quarterback and then the quarterback position along the offensive line, why not get new pieces there to build up?
Last one, on the defense, we've got guys like Percy Butler. Quan Martin played well down the stretch. They'll get Forrest back next year. See what they do with Cam Curl. Yeah. You mentioned Emmanuel Forbes. It's only year 1. KJ Henry. Like, how well were we able to really see what these guys can do? And how much do you think coaching will affect these guys going forward? Because these are some guys I think can play. I just don't know what was talent, what was lack of communication. I know lack of communication was huge. And, of course, coaching. How much better can these guys be in a better system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little bit of both, but more so I tailor on the side of coaching. And the reason I said at the top with Emmanuel Forbes, a cover 3 corner that you line up man-to-man against A.J. Brown and DJ Moore. I flat out don't get it. And that's the easiest way to kill the confidence of a kid. And again, I believe in Emmanuel Forbes. I liked him at Mississippi State. Did I like him at 16? No. I thought he was going to go in the first round as a guy with instincts that the NFL values, but I would have taken Christian Gonzalez in a heartbeat. Now, that's not to say, oh, now I'm praising Christian Gonzalez. No, he was my number 1 corner in the class last year as a man zone versatile corner that had a hell of a year before ending the season early. But there's talent in Washington secondary, and they've made a bunch of young additions. Now, everything I've heard out of Cam Curl's camp is that it's positive and that he would love to be in Washington moving forward. I would love to see number 31 back as well. I think he does everything. And anybody that watches Washington Commanders football, as I know you do, Doug, with a keen eye for everything, Cam Curl's a stud. And he was a hell of a draft pick late in day 3 out of Arkansas, and done everything for this defense when healthy and available. But for me, talent is everything, and getting guys in the building to do what you want to do. And starts at linebacker. And if you want to get more corners on the perimeter, if Kendall Fuller walks, you got to. Because I don't think Benjamin St. Juste is your CB1. Right now, Emmanuel Forbes, I can't sit here and say that Emmanuel Forbes is a CB1 in the NFL because I haven't seen it. And he was a man corner this year when he was a zone corner in college, which makes 0 sense. So I'm all for adding talent. I agree with you in that there are ball players in the secondary, getting guys in the building that want to play aggressively, play some more press man at times, and use your safeties. You can still play man, but you still play too high. No reason to have a single high safety with 10 yards of depth playing man against Tyreek Hill. So I'll digress from that. We all saw that stuff going on this year, but there is talent absolutely there at Washington's 3rd level.
Do you have a priority? One last one. Do you have a preference at head coach?
I like Mike McDonald a lot from Baltimore. I want a young, aggressive, physical head coach to where you're going to get after people. But I do like Bobby Slowick from Houston, and I do like Ben Johnson from Detroit. Now, I would have liked to seen some more schematic adjustments in that second half in that playoff game, but the architecture and how he uses guys like Amon St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs in space, identifying those skill sets and using them to your advantage behind that offensive line, which also helps. I like those three main core guys: Johnson in Detroit, Slowick in Houston, and McDonald in Baltimore.
Does Ben Johnson's, he's been in the league for a while at different position coaching wise. Has he been around enough league circles to put together a stat? You know, one thing we don't talk about, that we talk about scheme all the time. We talk about leadership all the time, but the ability to put together a top rate staff, just as important as anything. I mean, it's got to be one of the first couple of questions that they get asked in these interviews, right? Of these three guys that you're mentioning, who do you think has the best chance to put together one of these all-star type coaching staffs?
I trust in Ben Johnson, really. I think about it. You know, he's been around the league a while, as you mentioned, and all these guys have contacts wherever they've been, and they have their preferences on positional coaches that they potentially could follow him or certain things like that. But if you hire an offensive-minded head coach, right, he's going to tailor the offense, and he's just hiring tight end coaches and offensive line coaches, which is obviously important since we saw Bill Callahan left and John Metzko, which is an unfortunate loss, in my opinion. We saw that this year, really, unfortunately. But Ben Johnson, his ability on offense to not just run the strong side, attack the weak side, the counter game, RPO game, play action, he does it all with Jared Goff, who is a office chair on carpet from a mobility standpoint in the pocket. So you get a guy that has that potential Caleb Williams Drake made with Ben Johnson start from the bottom up, with we saw really from a defensive-minded head coach and D'Amico Ryans with CJ Stroud this year. I'm excited for wherever they get in the building, because I really do believe that Josh Harris and Adam Peters are going through this process the right way, the smart way, that we have not seen in Washington, which is really a breath of fresh air, Doug.
There's no doubt about it. It will be nice to have one man, one voice making the decisions. Somebody mentioned McLuhan to me the other day, like, oh, we had a GM. Well, how much did he actually get to do, right? Not the other stuff aside, but just having one voice will be nice. Ryan, be safe as you're traveling around. I know you're going to be super busy. Remind the folks at home when the podcast drops.
Absolutely. In the off season, most likely we'll be doing one episode a week on Fridays, potentially two as we get closer to the Senior Bowl and the draft. And then on Twitter, if you don't follow me there already, I'm at _Ryan Fowler. More written work, audio, and video is housed at Bleacher Report and as well on the draftnetwork.com.
Appreciate it, buddy. Always enjoy talking ball with you. We'll have you back on soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Doug.